Okay, so lately I've been noticing something that I don't really know what to do with, and I've always been really proud of how disciplined I perceive myself to be. But, recently I'm starting to wonder if what I'm calling discipline might just be something else. Okay, so let me lay it out for you. A few days ago, I did what I normally do. I hit my alarm promptly at 5 a.m. I got dressed, laced up, headed out, and flew through my 10-kilometer run, came back, got ready, sat down at my desk, did some studying, and then headed out the door for work. And I do this like clockwork every single weekday. Now, I had already accomplished so much before 8 a.m., but yet I was feeling heavy, like just mentally heavy. And my first thought was not pride for having accomplished so much, but rather feeling like I needed to push harder. And that had me thinking that maybe there is a problem there. Now, the last few months have been busy. I've been in marathon training, I'm still in medical school, I'm tutoring, I'm starting a podcast, I'm trying to grow this YouTube channel, and just all of the personal things I have going on at home as well. And I feel like I'm constantly just moving from one thing to the next with little free time in between. And to be honest, I don't mind being busy. I like having goals, I like structure, and I like feeling like I'm working towards something. But I started noticing that every time I felt tired, my answer to that was always the same, which was to push harder. If I didn't want to go for a run, I told myself to be more disciplined. And if I didn't go on that run, the next day I would make up for it. So maybe if I didn't run 10 kilometers on Monday, then on Tuesday, on top of my 8-kilometer run, I would do 18 kilometers to compensate. And if I struggled to focus while studying, I assumed I needed to work harder. If I wanted to take an evening off or, spend time with a friend or do anything that wasn't, just hitting the grindstone, I convinced myself that I had to earn that rest, and I could only get that rest after I finished whatever it was. Now, I've always looked up to disciplined people. You look at my recent podcast listens, it almost is all motivational or hearing stories from people I admire for their grit or whatever it is. Now, the kind of people who wake up early, keep promises to themselves, and keep showing up even when they don't feel like it, I've always wanted to be that person, and I don't know how that belief got instilled in me. It's just kind of always been there. And so I started thinking, like, where did I get this warped definition of discipline from? And I really don't know. Discipline to me means never missing a workout, studying even past the point of exhaustion, saying yes to just one more task, pushing through discomfort, and resting only after everything is done. And even then, it wouldn't be a very long break. So at some point, I stopped asking whether those things were actually helping me. And I think that's where I kind of have run into the issue I am right now. Now, I've been actually reading something psychologists call self-worth contingencies. And these refer to specific conditions such as physical appearance, academic success, or the approval of others upon which you stake your self-esteem. So research actually suggests that many people tie their sense of worth to specific domains. So when our self-esteem depends heavily on achievement, productivity can stop being just something we do and start feeling like proof that we're enough. And I started wondering if I wasn't just chasing discipline, maybe I was chasing the feeling that if I kept achieving, I'd finally feel like I was doing enough. Kind of a weird cycle to be in. And so if discipline is supposed to help me build a better life, why did it start feeling like I could never slow down? Now, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't wake up one day believing that rest had to be earned. So somewhere along the way, I had to have learned this. So it could have started in school, where students who stayed up the latest and studied the hardest were the ones everyone admired. Or maybe even it was social media, where we're constantly shown people with those productive morning vlogs of waking up at 4 a.m., working multiple jobs, training for this, building businesses, etc. And not only were these people going above and beyond, but somehow they made it all look effortless. And so one thing I found interesting while reading about this is that our brains are surprisingly good at repeating behaviors that get rewarded. Obviously, we do something, we get rewarded, our brain goes, yay me, we love that feeling, we get addicted to it. Now, in psychology, this is called reinforcement. So when a behavior consistently leads to a positive outcome, we're more likely to keep doing it. This to me seems like common sense. So if pushing through exhaustion has always been rewarded, it makes sense that my brain would keep reaching for that same strategy. But, I started wondering if I had kept using the same strategy even in situations where it wasn't helping anymore. So the strange part is, by most definitions, I have been doing everything right. I've been waking up early, I'm staying consistent with marathon training, I'm keeping up with medical school, I'm working, I'm making YouTube videos as my hobby. And so I was checking all the boxes I'd always associated with being disciplined. So why did it feel like I was constantly running on empty? So another thing I read is that psychologists often describe burnout as more than just being tired. It's a state of chronic stress that can show up as emotional exhaustion, feeling detached from what you're doing, and even feeling like you're becoming less effective despite working just as hard. Now, what surprised me wasn't that I felt tired. Anyone, for example, training for a marathon while in medical school, while working, is going to be tired. What surprised me was that I stopped looking forward to things I normally enjoy. And I realized I'd created a rule for myself that sounded like discipline, but didn't actually leave room for being human. I simply wasn't actually practicing discipline anymore. Now, maybe discipline isn't about ignoring your limits. Maybe it's about respecting them enough to keep showing up over the long term. Because if the goal is to build a life I can actually sustain, then constantly being guilty for or feeling guilty for resting, this probably isn't going to help me get there. Now, I really wish I could end this video by saying I finally figured it out, that I know exactly what healthy discipline and balance looks like. But honestly, I don't. And lately, instead of asking myself, how can I do more today? I've been trying and literally forcing myself to ask the question, what would actually help me show up well tomorrow? I always like to use the example of my marathon training, since everyone kind of can understand how mentally challenging running itself can be, whether you enjoy it or not. And marathon training has taught me something I keep forgetting in the rest of my life. And that is that recovery isn't the opposite of training, it's part of training. And so without recovery, there is no adaptation. And so discipline isn't measured by how much discomfort I can tolerate. It's measured by how consistently I can take care of the future version of myself. Now, when I started thinking about this, I thought I was asking whether I'd confused discipline with burnout, but I don't actually think that's the question anymore. Discipline isn't the enemy. Ambition isn't the enemy either. And I don't even think working hard is the enemy. I think what I'm questioning is my relationship with all of those things. So if success costs me the parts of life that make success meaningful, was I actually succeeding? And I don't think I'll figure this out in one video. And honestly, I think this is probably something I'll keep having to relearn throughout my life. But maybe that's the point. Maybe growth isn't about collecting answers. Maybe it's just about asking better questions. And so can discipline still be discipline if it leaves no room for recovery? I'm curious about what you think. And so thank you for tuning in to my new series called Unscripted. And if there are any deep questions about productivity, discipline, burnout, or anything in between, or just something you want me to talk about, let me know and I will see you in the next one. Bye.